Yes, they did. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for us starting this meeting a bit late. However, I am pleased to say that the March 7th, 2019 regular meeting of the Fairfax County School Board will now come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, a moment of silence, and the performance of the national anthem by the Rachel Carson Middle School Bella Voce under the direction of Kristen Reddig. Absolutely beautiful. And we have Principal Gordon Stokes in the audience. Thank you, Principal Stokes. They are wonderful. Okay. I don't know. No idea. The board held a closed meeting earlier this evening and certified compliance immediately upon reconvening in the public at the forum work session, which preceded tonight's regular meeting. 3.03, announcements. A few other announcements before we begin tonight's meeting. If you would like to review a copy of the agenda and any agenda item that is being discussed tonight, that information is on the table by the auditorium entrance. Tonight's agenda is available by going to School Board on the FCPS homepage and selecting Board Docs under the upcoming school board meetings. The meeting is also being streamed live online. Select School Board from the full menu, then click on the Watch Live button on the School Board Meetings webpage. Please turn off or silence your cell phone. I now call on Mr. Tigner for announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Theater in Our Schools Month is March 2019. The American Alliance for Theater and Education has designated March as Theater in Our Schools Month to celebrate and increase public awareness of the benefits of theater education for youth development. The theme is fostering a culture of creativity. Theater education has the power to raise academic achievements and to stimulate innovation and creativity among students. The Alliance encourages citizens to celebrate the positive impact of theater in the classroom and to remember that all students should have access to quality theater education in their lives. Music in Our Schools Month is also March 2019. March has been officially designated by the National Association for Music Education for the observance of Music in Our Schools Month, the time of year when music education becomes the focus of schools across the nation. This year's theme is All Music, All People, and is designed to raise awareness of the importance of music education for all children and to remind citizens that school is where all children should have access to music. It also is an opportunity for music teachers to bring their music programs to the attention of the school and the community and to display the benefits school music brings to students of all ages. Youth Art Month is also March 2019. Art education contributes powerful educational benefits to all, elementary and secondary students. Art education develops students' creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking abilities. Teacher sensitivity to beauty, order, and other expressive qualities gives students a deeper understanding of multicultural values and beliefs, and brings to life what students learn in other subjects. The theme for Youth Art Month 2019 is Your Art, Your Story. The Fairfax County School Board believes that support should be given to arts teachers as they strengthen art education in schools and communities, and all citizens are urged to take an interest in and give full support to quality school art programs for children and youth. National Sleep Awareness Week is March 10 to 16, 2019. The National Sleep Foundation is celebrating its annual Sleep Awareness Week, March 10 to 16, 2019, to raise awareness of the health benefits of sleep and its importance to safety and productivity. This year's theme, Begin with Sleep, highlights the importance of good sleep health for individuals to best achieve their personal, family, and professional goals. The National Sleep Foundation believes that the value of a good night's sleep, which carries into one's day to improve not just health, but mood, productivity, well-being, and overall quality of life. Most of us know that getting a good night's sleep is important, but to few of us actually make those 8 or so hours a priority. So many of us have forgotten what being really, truly rested feels like. To further complicate matters, stimulants like coffee, energy drinks, alarm clocks, and external lights, including those from electronic devices, interfere with our natural sleep/wake cycle. Sleep needs vary across ages and are especially important by lifestyle and health. To determine how much sleep you need, it's important to examine what lifestyle factors are affecting the quality and quantity of your sleep, such as work schedules and stress. For information on healthy sleep, visit the National Sleep Foundation's website at sleep.org. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Tigner. I now call on Mrs. Strauss for a recognition of Joe McDonald.
Thank you. It is an honor to recognize Joe McDonald this evening, who has been named the most outstanding crossing guard in Virginia. On February 13th, Fairfax County Public Schools participated in Crossing Guard Appreciation Day, a statewide event, as a way to say thank you to those individuals who help students cross the street safely on their way to and from school. We are grateful for the 80 crossing guards who manage 174 school-related crossings every day. Crossing guards, who are actually employees of the Fairfax County Police Department, do so much for our own students and families and are often among the first adults to interact with students each day. We can't thank them enough for their daily efforts to watch over and protect our students. Tonight, we are recognizing Mr. Joe McDonald, who was recently selected as one of Virginia's most outstanding crossing guards in 2018. He is one of 6 crossing guards to receive this honor. Joe McDonald is a familiar sight to many in Fairfax County Public Schools as he performs his duties flawlessly and greets students every day at Coates Elementary School. As you may know, Coates Elementary School has a large population of students who walk to school, so Joe's post is a busy one. Additionally, Joe works on a regular basis as a crossing guard at Langston Hughes Middle School and Hutchison Elementary School, and fills in as needed at South Lakes High School. Like other dedicated crossing guards, Joe McDonald can be found at his post in all kinds of weather, helping children to cross the street safely, assisting parents with negotiating the kiss and ride areas, and managing the buses. Joe has been a crossing guard for 8 years now and has built relationships with parents, teachers, administrators, and students during that time. He says he finds the job to be very rewarding because it gives him an opportunity to get to know people and develop a bond and trust with the students and parents. Joe McDonald is very much an integral part of the community, giving of himself in his spare time. In fact, he is part of the mentoring program at Coates Elementary School, where he mentors 2 sets of boys at Coates on Tuesdays and 2 sets of girls at Hutchison. To keep himself busy between his morning and afternoon crossing responsibilities, Joe McDonald volunteers on Wednesdays in the Fair Oaks Hospital Post-Surgery Care Unit. You can find Joe volunteering with the City of Fairfax Fire Department, where he helps with administrative chores on Thursdays and with bingo on Fridays. With all that he is doing, Joe manages to save some of his time and energy on Mondays for ice hockey lessons so that he can keep young and stay in shape. Bravo, Joe. Please join me in congratulating Joe McDonald on being selected as the Virginia Most Outstanding Crossing Guard. He is truly deserving of this honor and of our thanks for keeping a watchful eye on our students. He is a fine example of a caring, contributing member of our community. At this time, I would like to invite Joe, his family and friends, and Coast Elementary School Principal, Jesse Kraft, to please join us at the dais for a photo with the board.
I now call on Ms. Palchik for the VSBA Honor Roll Nominations Resolution.
Thank you. Whereas public schools and local businesses are an integral part of this community, and whereas many local businesses play a crucial role in supporting our schools, and whereas the economic health of our community, state, and nation depend on a strong public school system, and whereas collaboration between local public schools and local businesses strengthens schools and the business community alike by providing a well-trained and highly educated workforce. And whereas an excellent public school system is vital to the quality of life in this community and fundamental to preserving a strong democratic society now and in the future, therefore be it resolved that the Fairfax County School Board names the Dewberry Companies, Inc., Integrity Management Services, Inc., and WorldGate, LLC to the 2019 Virginia School Boards Association Business Honor Roll in appreciation for their ongoing support of Fairfax County Public Schools. I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Derenak-Kofax. Ms. Palchik, would you like to speak to your resolution?
Yes, very briefly. As you see, the businesses are not here with us today, and that is because they are being nominated this evening and will be recognized by the board at our regular business meeting in June. That being said, we do have many incredible business partners, and as Ms. Corbett Sanders and I saw this morning, the Community Foundation here in Fairfax County continues to work with our partners in the public and private sector. But today we do have the honor to nominate 3 that through our Business Partnerships Office have done an incredible job of supporting many of our schools and our students. And I especially want to recognize the Dewberry Companies just down the street who not only have been partners for many years, but have taken additional support duties when some other companies have been unable to continue. So we have excellent partners, and we look forward to nominating them and seeing them back here in June for a full recognition of the board.
Ms. Derenak-Kofax.
Just very briefly, thank you to all these amazing partnerships with our schools. We can't do it without you, and we look forward to honoring you further in June.
So with that, I'd like to call for the vote. All those in favor? And that vote is unanimous. The next order of business is citizen participation. Tonight, we have 3 citizens who have signed up to address the board, and we also have 1 video testimony. Speakers are requested to limit their remarks to not more than 3 minutes. The school board will not hear statements involving issues that have been scheduled for public hearings, such as capital improvement program, budget, and boundaries. Complaints regarding individual students or school-based employees should be directed to the appropriate school principal or other school official. Speakers should refrain from using personally identifiable information in connection with an individual student. Speakers are expected to deliver their comments with the decorum and respect appropriate to the conduct of the public's business. Please be mindful that there are often young children in attendance at these meetings or watching at home, so language should be appropriate for all age levels. Thank you for your cooperation, and thanks to those who have come to speak to us tonight. Our first speaker is Mr. Norman Hall, followed by Monica Baruti and Amanda King.
Good evening. I'm Norm Hall, the Advocacy Chair of the Fairfax County Special Education PTA. As you might recall, exactly 1 month ago, I used my citizen time comments to discuss the new community schools operating within Fairfax County. As is my general theme, I find so much that is well-intentioned and well-delivered within the school district. But there's no point to making a comment if I can't find something, maybe 2 things that could be done even better. I return tonight because a step backwards has been taken compared to that night. You see, my comments that night made reference to SOL subgroup results for students with disabilities at both Whitman Middle School and Mount Vernon Woods Elementary. These data points came from FCPS website school profiles. Now, there has been a step forward since my February 21st comments, because that night I pointed out that I had to go to the Commonwealth's website to get scores for 2018. Now, I understand that work continues on an equity dashboard relating to the strategic plan enhancements. Still, I don't think it's asking too much that until those are implemented, the public should be able to look at the FCPS website to see school SOL performance by subgroup for the past 3 years, 2016, 2017, and 2018. To be clear, this isn't just about students with disabilities. This is about all subgroups that have been reported since No Child Left Behind was implemented. And while on the subject of the school profiles, if you go 1 tab over from test results to safe and secure, could we make sure that that page also has last year's data? Even better would be disciplinary action data, as the ORC study plan has been slow to appear before the community with respect to students with disabilities. We can get to equity, but it will take transparency and accountability for effective community buy-in, at least in my opinion. And I thank you very much.
Ms. Baruti?
Hello, my name is Monique Baruti. I'm an FCPS parent of, well, only 3 students in your school system now. 1 is in private school. It is unbelievable to me that this board thought it was acceptable to add a forum topic to the forum agenda at the last minute. Filing an amicus brief on behalf of Gavin Grimm is well beyond the scope of the Fairfax County School Board. It is not good governance to add something like this at the last minute to avoid having to list it on the public agenda so the public can comment on it. If you're proud of the things you do, you shouldn't be afraid to make a case for them publicly. I can only hope that when we elect new school board members in the fall, they will be more dedicated to transparency with the public they are elected to represent and will prioritize FCPS students over their own ideological beliefs. Thank you.
Ms. King?
Good evening. My name is Amanda Campbell, and first I would like to thank Ms. Keys-Gamara and Mr. Moon for listening to the strategic plan comments we had at the last meeting and for asking follow-up questions during Dr. Brabrand's testimony. I'd also like to thank Dr. Brabrand for speaking with a small group of us after in the hallway. That willingness to listen makes these citizen participation moments very important, and I really, truly appreciate it. Tonight, I'd like to ask the board and FCPS to consider some thoughts and actions regarding the calendar. Student safety is #1 priority, of course, and I am not in any way debating the weather calls. But that said, students were only in school between planned days off and early releases and the inclement weather. Students were only in school for 9 full days in the entire month of January. We haven't had a full week of school since January 7th. The lack of routine is evident in the classroom, and even my daughter's teacher was expressing relief that they had 4 days of school in a row last week. There are a lot of aspects that aren't in FCPS's control, but there are some things that are. Consider the number of planned days off and early releases that happen between January and April. How could this time be structured in a way that impacts routine a little bit less? In addition, consider removing the attachment between spring break and Easter and moving spring break to the end of March every year to allow for a full month of consistent school routines leading into the SOLs at the end of April and early May. As the policies stand now, the morning classes of the half-day non-CAP preschools are inordinately affected by the inclement weather closures, as they are canceled entirely when there are both 2-hour delays and school closures. By my count, we've had 5 closures and 7 2-hour delays, so the morning half-day classes have missed 12 days of their special education services compared to just 6 days for the afternoon classes, with no way to make up that lost time. And it's a huge strain on the related service providers who are required to provide a certain number of hours every month, and yet they have no time to make that up in. Please take time to consider solutions that could potentially equalize the impact. And that would go in K-12 as well. There's a new law awaiting the governor's signature that would allow FCPS to start before Labor Day without needing a waiver. I would ask that you support that. Hopefully he'll be signing it at the end of the month. While weather and VDOT's ability to clear the roads are not in FCPS's control, as the 3rd largest employer in the state of Virginia, FCPS does certainly have some lobby power with the state to make improvements. The entire county should not be coming to a halt for 2 inches of snow. But like I said, no, it's not in your control. But, I know these are not easy decisions and nothing will make everyone happy, but I appreciate your time and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. We now have a video testimony.
Good evening, school board members, Dr. Brand, leadership team, and the community. I'm Tina Williams, a school counselor and president of AFT Local 2401, Fairfax County Federation of Teachers Union. I will be speaking tonight on behalf of our members, professional educators who are the foundation of our school system. Public education is the great equalizer in our society and deserves full funding at every level. Thank you all for your efforts to address this in the FY20 budget. Special thanks to Karen Corbett-Sanders, Dahlia Palchak, and Ryan McElveen for attending the Red for Ed March to fully fund public education in January. It is not an exaggeration to say that educators in our county are facing a crisis of increasing workloads and professional responsibilities, combined with a lack of time and freedom to carry out their commitment to excellent classroom instruction. We have consistently heard that our members are regularly forced to work outside contract hours. Members tell us non-teaching administrative burdens continue to increase, and they have less unencumbered planning time. Increased focus on test scores, data, meetings, paperwork, and a lack of support from administration in these areas have left our members feeling like their abilities and worth as professionals are not valued by FCPS. The pressure to be perfect under these constraints is taking a toll on our members' ability to best educate our children. Many members have told us that schools are spread thin and their workload does not reflect or respect their mental health, wellness, and family lives. Educators are not interchangeable or easily replaceable, and our members are reaching a breaking point. Only 6% are fully satisfied with their wages, and a majority have considered leaving FCPS or leaving education entirely in the last 3 years. We hear a similar story across our county. If FCPS is to be the premier school system it deserves to be, it must respect its professional educators, pay them well, and give them a voice in refining policies that impact their work and support student success. Wages and benefits must recognize and reflect the dignity of our educators and the expectations of them inside and outside the classroom. Policies must be written and enforced with the classroom perspective in mind. Educators want what our students need. FCFT members have begun to organize around these issues and look forward to working with you to address this crisis. Together, we can secure full funding for public education, professionalism within the education system, and a respect for professionals in the education field. Thank you.
I now call on Mr. Tigner for student representative matters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't able to make it to the last meeting, and I apologize. I was out with the flu, as I know a lot of my fellow students were. It's been going around. I also heard it might have been going around a little bit in the school board office, too. And if anyone hasn't gotten it yet, make sure to wash your hands. And if you haven't been vaccinated yet, get vaccinated right away, and hopefully we can prevent that spread as best as possible, and our students can get back to school. If it's all right, I'd like to read the remarks. I wasn't able to make it to last meeting, and we weren't allowed to read a statement, but a peer of mine, Sarah Luthra, spoke on behalf of an issue that's really important to me, which is the sort of impact of our 2-hour policy stance from the school board and how it's been sort of influenced down to the student body. So I'd like to read that real quick. I would like to offer my support and recognition to our student speaker, Sarah Luthra, who just spoke about the FCPS 2-hour homework policy. This is a policy that our wonderful board supports, but sadly, that is not common knowledge among the student or teacher body. When I have spoken to students about this at high schools across our county, I've only met one student who already knew about this policy. And that was because I had talked to her about it beforehand. As a board, we should follow up on the legislation we condone, and we should always ensure that it has the desired effect on the student body that we prescribe it to. In the 2017-2018 youth survey, 35% of 12th graders spend 3 or more hours on homework a night, 60.3% spend 2 or more hours a night, and I commend my fellow speaker, Sarah Luthra, for coming forward to speak on this issue. Stress from homework has been a reoccurring topic of conversation I've faced as I've spoken to students of FCPS, and because of this, I think it should be a valuable topic to revisit and reassess and hopefully spread awareness on as a school board as well. On top of this, I actually did speak with other school board student reps in Virginia about this. We had, I'm sort of setting up a quick meeting after VSBA earlier this year. A lot of us felt we came a little bit short on being able to confer with one another. I sent an email out to our big email group, and we organized a huge sort of Skype meeting. We all talked about issues such as this, and homework was a reoccurring thing for all students, not just in Northern Virginia. There was a lot of stress for that. It's just a very common thing from the student perspective that having all this pressure, that when you go home, there's just more and more and more and more. And hey, maybe one day you're out for the count, or one day you've got sports. Like right now, I've got lacrosse season that started up. That's 3 hours out of every day, including commute. And then on top of that, I would still like to keep working out, so it's another hour and a half out of it. On top of that, I've got homework, and then I work for the school board, and I do all this kind of things, and my day so quickly disappears. And then I might have to help out my friends or something with small things just come up here or there. And before you know it, I got the flu. And now I have 3 full school days that I'd missed, and I have to catch up on it. And I'm losing night after night of sleep while I'm just recovering from a sickness. And that kind of thing puts a lot of strain on our students. I also would like to mention that I was invited to be a panelist and presenter at the National PTA Convention next Tuesday, which I'm very excited about. So I get to bring that student perspective to a really important convention, and that's pretty cool. I'm really happy about that. I would also like to address sort of inclusivity among students in light of the forum. No matter its form, I'd like to just present an observation. We had our student graduation speaker tryouts at our school Monday after school, and I went and sat in and listened to them, and I actually tried out myself as well. But listening to these student speeches, more than half of them spoke about sort of the diversity within students, and directly referring to sexual orientation and diverse sexual orientation, and how we're all in this together type of idea, and that we've all made it, and we are one. That was the reoccurring theme, is that we are a class together. And this is an important stance to students, and because of that, I think it should be an important stance to the board. And I recommend reaching out in whatever form that may take to assure the student body that our stance on that aligns with seeing every student as an equal. Also, snow days was a big thing. It was mentioned a few times, and in light of that, a lot of pressure on students was put down because of it, not just from parents wanting their kids to be in school, but teachers feel stressed, and admin feels stressed because they're looking at their timeline and they're seeing these missing all these days. And one class, let's say those, if we have a block schedule, those Blue Day classes are 4 days behind those Green Day classes, and how are we going to catch up? And it's a lot of pressure that you sort of feel recurring in the school. And there's a really great suggestion, I don't know if it was pursued, but to put some of these professional development days and early releases and teacher work days into later months instead of during those winter times. And I thought that was really smart. Like, for example, March, we've got barely anything planned, and just being able to do that might take a little bit of load off of that sort of hot spot for school snow days. And the final thing was a little bit more of a personal thing, and it comes down to my duties as a student representative to the school board. My, I guess, assigned hours and what I do know about is generally public meetings and a few other things. And that's like what the job description is, and that's what I had assumed I was coming into last year. But what actually, I've worked 100 to 200 hours overtime this year, visiting schools, talking to other students, and all these sorts of things. And that's just what I feel is necessary in order to do my job well. Because I bring one perspective, but there are 187,000 students out there. And that's less than a second for every student, so that's still nothing, right? So it's sort of an uphill battle, but the issue with that is piling on top of homework and all my other responsibilities, if I'd like to be a student as well, I sort of came to notice the reality of paying for college and how tough that's going to be. And I've noticed that I haven't had any time to apply for any scholarships. I have zero time. And especially, this is something I think we should look forward to in the future for future student representatives. But these students who get to this position and get voted in by their peers, they're extremely inclined. And the ones like the one, Niarika from last year, absolutely amazing. She got a full ride to Duke. And that's absolutely amazing. But for some of these students, they pour a lot of work into this position. They aren't able to apply for some of these scholarships. And I was wondering, I talked to Maryland student representative, and their board actually compensated them for their time with a scholarship for college. And I thought that was a really interesting method to do it. And if anyone would like to bring that to forum or pursue that further, please let me know. I'd love to talk about that. I'd also like to recognize a few Boy Scouts. From Troop 1107, we have Oliver. From Troop 129, Robert. From Troop 688, Harrison. From Troop 1145, Connor. And also from Troop 1145, Adrian. And from Troop 160, Vin. Thank you guys so much for coming out. And it's great to see that our younger community is also involved in these board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tigner. Now I call on Dr. Brabrand for the third quarter budget review.
Thank you, Chairman Corbett Sanders. I'm going to have our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Lee Burden, come down and give you a quick review of third quarter. There's not a lot of activity to share with you, but we have a couple of things, and we want to update the board, and we'll be glad to take any questions.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school board, and Dr. Brabrand. The third quarter review offers an opportunity to revise the fiscal 19 budget based on current year trends and any new requirements that have become known or requested since the mid-year budget review that was approved on December 20th of 2018. You should also note that the third quarter review work session is scheduled for March 25th with action at the regular school board meeting on April 4th. The agenda item is organized with descriptions of the recommended changes followed by updated fund statements. And once the third quarter is approved by the school board, it's forwarded to the county for inclusion in their third quarter review packet for any necessary supplemental appropriations. And the data is as of the end of December. For the school operating fund revenue on page 1, there is one change. This is an annual adjustment to National Board Certified Teachers that's typically processed at third quarter each year. It's a $225,000 reduction in revenue from the Commonwealth as the actual number of teachers receiving National Board Certification funds is less than that was budgeted. We've had to adjust that at third quarter for the last few years, and so we plan to adjust the estimate in the fiscal 21 budget next time so that we don't have to keep coming back with this. Displayed on page 2 is the school operating fund expenditure changes. The first item is the MBCT expenditure change, which parallels the revenue change going down $225,000. And again, we'll adjust that in the fiscal 21 budget. Also on page 2 are expenditure adjustments recognizing the fiscal 19 staffing reserve savings. As of the January staffing review, there was a balance of 60.2 positions in the staffing reserve. Although that says 50, so it must be 50, and my notes are wrong. So 50. The balance exists due to actual enrollment falling below projection, as was detailed in the fiscal 19 mid-year budget review. It's recommending that the savings of $4.3 million, including 50 positions, be recognized at this time. Okay, it's not 50, it is 60.2. The remaining 10.2 positions will be utilized as necessary for any other staffing needs that come up between now and the end of the year. So even though there's 60.2 remaining right now, we're recognizing only 50 of them and leaving 10.2 in the reserve. Typically, the third quarter review does not include adjustments to the upcoming budget, but we think it's prudent to go ahead and set aside funds now to acknowledge the additional costs of the revised fiscal 20 salary schedule changes, as well as set aside additional funds for the staffing reserve. So the fiscal 19 unused revenue of $4.3 million would become an addition to the fiscal 20 beginning balance. On the expenditure side, we are proposing 2 uses of the $4.3 million in unused revenue. Recall that in order to provide 23 steps for each lane on the teacher salary scale, eliminate the grandfathering, and maintain a slight salary differential between teachers with a BA plus 15 and BA plus 30 will cost $1 million in fiscal 20. So the revised teacher salary scale was recommended for fiscal 20 in January. The first year funding for the salary scale revision is being requested to be set aside, and the recurring cost of the salary scale revision will be picked up in the fiscal 21 budget. Another fiscal 20 expenditure request is that the remaining staffing reserve or savings of $3.3 million be set aside for the fiscal 20 staffing reserve. This funding will allow greater flexibility in staffing reserve positions for fiscal 20. Recall that the staffing reserve was reduced to adjust school staffing formulas, but we still, of course, want to be cautious. And so this, of course, has an effect on the beginning balance, which you can see on page 4. Right now, we have a beginning balance of $24.5 million from the fiscal 18 budget to fund the beginning balance in the fiscal 20 budget. This would increase the beginning balance for fiscal 20 by $4.3 million to $28.9 million, with the funds earmarked for the specific uses that I've identified, the salary scale fix and the staffing reserve increase. And it should always be noted that $28.9 million is less than 1% of the total operating budget. On page 5 and 6 are changes to the other funds. The school construction fund includes an increase of 5 positions utilizing existing funding. The additional staff will support managing and maintaining safe environments within the construction areas, negotiating with various parties regarding acquisition of property, technical engineering support, contract management, and managing project-specific submittals. Food and Nutrition Services reflects an increase of $50,000 from a Share Our Strength and Virginia No Kid Hungry grant, with a corresponding increase in expenditures of $50,000. The Share Our Strength grant is to provide startup funds to increase student participation in breakfast programs. So this basically funds breakfast in the classroom, grab-and-go breakfast, and second chance breakfast. Right now we have 33 existing breakfast in the classroom. This will take that total to 38. We have 5 that have grab-and-go. This will take that to 6. And we currently have 5 that have a second chance breakfast, and this will add 3 more high schools to that. Adult and community ed. Revenue expenditures for the Adult and Community Education, or ACE Fund, are about $10 million. The third quarter budget review includes $41,862 increase in revenue, due to a net increase in the federal funding for Adult Education and Family Literacy Act grant awards. Corresponding increase in expenditures is also reflected as a result of the additional grant award. As far as grants go, the net impact of new and revised grants results in an increase of about $400,000, $415,597. The list of the grants that have changed from the mid-year are listed, and the amounts that go along with that. There are no changes to the summer school subfund, the school insurance fund, health and flexible benefits, ERFC, and then fund statements for each fund that identify everything that I just told you. Start on page 7. And again, the work session is on March 25th with action at the regular meeting on April 4th.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burden. I have a number of people that would like to speak. I'm going to start with Ms. Evans.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burden. I appreciate the excellent report. I'll start with just one kudo on the Second Chance program. I'm very glad to see that we're going to be expanding that. I just visited one the other day at Justice High School, and it was great to see the students go in and get their breakfast, very quick breakfast. I visited there with Senator Saslaw, and we were both very, very impressed. So I'm delighted to see that this is being expanded. On a larger issue, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the change in the staffing reserve. I'm a little concerned about returning those positions at this point in the school year. As you know, in some of our schools, we do get some surprises in the late winter and early spring. So I'm not sure that 10 positions, 10.2 positions, is enough cushion for us. So my question is, why now? Why would we need to return those 50 positions now as opposed to waiting to see if we in fact need them?
My understanding is typically third quarter is when we return funds for the staffing reserve if we have a balance. This is the first time that we've had a balance in a number of years, so this may seem new. Additionally, we looked back to see how many positions are allocated between March and June each year and feel that 10.2 positions will be adequate to address any needs that would come up during that time.
Well, I do remember the year when there was a need, but we didn't have the positions. So I'm not sure that history would necessarily be a guide in those years where there was a need, but no positions. So I'm glad we have adequate positions so far, but would there be, I mean, I see that you want to use some of it, one point something for the scales, but then put 3.3 million and 34 positions into the next year. What would be the problem with just keeping those positions in this year and then turning them over if they're not needed? Why could we not do that?
Nothing whatsoever. You could defer that until year end, and the same thing could happen.
Well, I will let my colleagues know that would be my advocacy, to keep those 34 positions in there, just in case we need them. And if we don't, then we can recapture the money then. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. McElveen.
Thank you. I noticed the line item about the National Board Certified Teachers, which is quite unfortunate. And I think we have probably been seeing this over time as a result of the board's lack of investment in that certification. But can you give us the numbers?
Yes. Okay. Currently, we have about 470 Fairfax teachers that are national board certified. But only 233 are actually eligible for the stipend because you must work greater than 50% of the instructional day with students in order to receive that state-funded stipend. We did have 13 new teachers jump in this year, and so those teachers receive, the first year is $5,000. It's the subsequent years that are $2,500. So we have far more than, or it's almost double of what are actually receiving the stipend, just because of the eligibility requirements.
So what you're saying is that 50% of these folks are actually not in the classroom more than 50% of the time?
That's correct.
Wow.
Thank you, Mr. McElveen. Ms. Hines?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple questions on the staffing reserve also. So I'm wondering, years ago, it was my understanding that about by the end of February, the school system would stop hiring new teachers. And I guess that's because we would close the staffing reserve kind of at this point in the year. And then after that, the assumption was that if we had a need, we would hire long-term substitutes. That's just my recollection of how we used to do it, and it's going back a ways. So I'm just wondering, is that what we would have to do if we don't keep enough positions, right, in the staffing reserve through the end of the school year? Then we would have to fill any need that opens up with a temporary substitute. Is that right?
Well, I mean, we might very well do that anyway, just because as it gets later in the year, it becomes more difficult to recruit someone because, you know, most of them are employed. But Dr. Nixon might be able to address that better as far as what we do if we have a need for a teacher very late in the school year.
Well, we would be providing those temporary contracts. We do not offer contracts at that late point in the year.
So we don't offer them, so then we wouldn't be using the staffing reserve, or we'd be using the money in the staffing reserve in a different way?
We would be using substitute teachers.
Okay, with the funds in the staffing reserve? No.
No, it's funded in substitute funding.
Okay, I mean, I only asked just to get some clarification that if we keep the 60 positions in the staffing reserve through the end of the year, I don't think there's any harm in keeping them in there. I just wonder if that's something we use anyway, just practically speaking. Anyway, just a thought, we can come back to it. And so my only other question was, Ms. Burden, you mentioned at some point, and I wanted to just go back to it, that these figures, that something here is less than 1% of the total budget, and I wanted to get back to what you said about that. Is this that the money that's fallen out of the budget at this point in the third quarter is less than 1% of the total budget?
No. We always, there's a year lag. So the funds that are that represent the beginning balance in the fiscal 20 budget are funds that were set aside out of the year end of the fiscal 18 budget. And so that number right now for fiscal 20 is $24.5 million. If our recommendations are approved, then $4.3 million would be added to that beginning balance, earmarked for these two items, the staffing reserve and the salary schedule fix, which would increase that beginning balance for fiscal 20 from $24.5 to $4.3 million more. And that's about 1% of the total budget, that total beginning balance with the 4.3 added.
Got you. And we do worry a little bit about that, right? We don't want to begin we don't want to have that structural imbalance going from year to year. Although this is not one-time money, right? We're moving.
It is one-time money, and it's not one-time money. It is one-time money in that it's money that falls out at the end of the year, but money falls out at the end of every year. K-12 is a very labor-intensive environment, and I don't think that having 1% is a structural deficit. I think that that is a natural occurrence with a labor-intensive industry. If you look at the other divisions around us, they all have beginning balances that are 1.5%, 2%. So being on the low side of 1%, I do not consider that to be any sort of problem whatsoever.
Yeah, and actually in my time on the board, it's been higher than that for sure. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Ms. Palchik?
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate this. I'm very excited, as Ms. Evans said, to hear about our expansion in our breakfast program. I know, for instance, here in Luther Jackson, one of our community partners helped purchase a cart. I guess I was hoping we could perhaps get a list of the current and the additional schools that are added to the three separate programs, and that could be as a follow-up.
Oh, can I just tell you?
Oh, sure.
The breakfast in the classroom is Center Ridge Elementary, Pine Spring Elementary, Sleepy Hollow Elementary, West Lawn Elementary, and Brookfield Elementary. Grab and Go is Poe Middle School, and Second Chance is Falls Church, Justice, and Annandale.
Okay, and if we could just get a full list at some point.
We can send you a list.
We'll put that in the Bray Brand briefing so that you guys can have it just to refer to later in notes as you deal with the community and questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to Mr. Taylor if he's helped with that.
Thank you, Ms. Burden. I really appreciate this, and we look forward to our work session on March 25th, and we will be taking action on the third quarter budget review on April 4th at our regular meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the portion of the meeting where the board will confirm any action regarding issues up. Nope, we don't have any for that. Never mind. Now I call on Ms. Evans for a motion on strategic plan enhancements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the board accept the proposed targets and metrics to the strategic plan.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. McElveen. Ms. Evans, would you like to speak to your motion?
Oh, yes, just briefly. For the public, I'd just like to summarize a little bit of what we're doing tonight. The IGNITE is our strategic plan, which this board created in the 2014 to 15 school year with 4 goal areas: student success, caring culture, premier workforce, and resource stewardship. This is a living document which we review every year. We have goal reports on each of the 4 goal areas to see how we are doing in meeting the various goals within the goal areas. We also review the strategic plan itself and the metrics by which we measure our success. And so that's what we're doing tonight, is creating some enhancements for our strategic plan going forward. So some of the areas where we are going to measure success in the school system is in eliminating the achievement gap, in providing access to high quality early education for all of our students, making sure that we do what we need to do to help our students and our employees make healthy life choices, create market competitive salaries, and be sure that we have effectiveness and efficiency in our budgeting, and that we have an equity lens on all that we do as well. So we are looking at our measures of our success, and so we have had a work session and multiple discussions on our strategic plan. So what we're doing tonight is adding enhancements and refinements, and I enthusiastically support the strategic plan and the refinements that we are adding tonight. I know there are a couple of amendments, but I hope my colleagues will all support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Mr. McElveen, would you like to speak to your second?
Ms. Evans covered the territory well, and I support this, and I have nothing further. Thank you.
Excellent. So now I call on Mr. Moon for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to amend the main motion as follows. Amend the strategic plan metrics, targets, and aspirations by including Category B Level 2 students within the students with disabilities, student group for all student success metrics associated with the all students with aspirations. More specifically, the following 2 metrics would be expanded to include all students with disabilities, rather than excluding those receiving Category B Level 2 services. So the strategic plan data better represents all FCPS students with disabilities. Percent of grade 3 students who read at or above grade level based upon progress reports. Percent of students who either pass a college level exam or earn an industry certification before graduation.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Mr. Moon, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Briefly, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank those people who came to the school board meetings many times over, reminding us to be a more inclusive of students with disabilities in our student success goals, and I appreciate that. And not only those who came to the school board meetings, but there were many out there who were advocating for the same thing. And based upon all those feedback from the community, and also discussing with fellow school board members, and also with the superintendent staff, that what I'm trying to, what my amendment is trying to accomplish is this. Some of the student success metrics currently crafted exclude the Category B self-contained students. My amendment proposed to include Category B self-contained students in all metrics associated with all students with aspirations, while excluding them from the advanced academic metrics. Excluding them from the advanced metrics is based upon guidance from Department of Special Services that advanced metrics are inappropriate for Category B self-contained students, so these students should be removed from this analysis. However, my amendment would add additional data to two existing metrics for students with a disability group. One in the third metric on this one on page 7, and another in the first metric on page 8. And we already have data to do that. Therefore, in the third metric on page 7, under students with disabilities, 48% will become 41%. That's a 3-year baseline data. And 471 will become 803. We are including more students in our assessment. In the first metric on page 8, the 19% will become 17%. Again, that's a 3-year baseline data. Other student success metrics that include Category B self-contained and all other students with disabilities in the students with disability subgroups are pass rates on reading SOLs, pass rates on mathematics SOLs, Virginia on-time graduation rates, percent of students with plans for college or career on the senior survey, and percent and number of high school students with access to an FCPS provided individual computer or tablet. Those metrics are already included, and we are keeping them with my amendment. My amendment strengthens our student success goals for all students. We owe it to our special education students to make sure that their achievement is also closely monitored, and we work to reduce their achievement gaps in as many metrics as reasonably possible. And I would like to ask for my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, would you like to speak to your second?
Just briefly. Madam Chair, I fully support this motion. I thank Mr. Moon for doing the research and digging into this information. We've heard a number of speakers and a number of constituents who have been concerned about this issue, and I think this is a beginning to really improve our metrics and make even our metrics more inclusive. And I believe that we will continue to dive to do more, but I certainly support this amendment, and Mr. Moon spoke to it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. McLaughlin.
I, too, just want to echo my appreciation for Mr. Moon bringing this to the board, and especially I do want to thank one of our citizens who spoke this evening, Norm Hall, and the Special Education PTA, otherwise known as SEPTA. It is extremely helpful to our board when we have our engaged citizens who have such an in-depth knowledge in areas that we don't always know enough about. And this is an example of how you're bringing your voice to an issue and advocating and helping us to learn more about how we can ensure all students are recognized, and truly we create an inclusive way of measuring, monitoring, and helping all students to succeed. So I want to just say my appreciation and thanks, and please keep up the great work.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Before I take the vote, I do want to thank Mr. Moon and Ms. Keys-Gamarra for bringing this motion to the floor. It is so important. You know, many of you know that we've been working on trying to have more refined metrics as part of our strategic planning process for the greater part of about the past 18 months to 2 years of really trying to do this work with intentionality. And this this amendment actually demonstrates not only intentionality but inclusivity, which is something that is critical to realizing the objective of having a caring, inclusive culture here in Fairfax County Public Schools. So I'm happy to support that, to support your motion. And with that, the motion before the board is I move to amend the main motion as follows. Amend the strategic plan metrics, targets, and aspirations by including Category B, Level 2 students within the Students with Disabilities student group for all student success metrics associated with the All Students Will aspirations. More specifically, the following two metrics would be expanded to include all students with disabilities rather than excluding those receiving Category B Level 2 services, so that the strategic plan data better represents all Fairfax County Public Schools students with disabilities. Percent of grade 3 students who read at or above grade level based on progress reports. Percent of students who either pass a college level exam or earn an industry certification before graduation. All those in favor? And that vote is unanimous with Mr. Wilson away from the table. Oh, okay, Mr. Wilson, he is okay. I now call on Mr. McElveen for an amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to amend the main motion as follows. Amend the metrics, targets, and aspirations in the FCPS strategic plan by replacing the aspirational statement, all students will have access to an FCPS provided individual computer or tablet consistent with One Fairfax's policy of digital access for all residents, to include the bolded phrase, through the FCPS On initiative, all students will have access to an FCPS provided individual computer or tablet consistent with One Fairfax's policy of digital access for all residents. I so move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Palchik. Mr. McElveen, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just very briefly, because this is a very simple addition, we are just adding the name of the FCPS On initiative to our strategic plan. Previously, that name was not associated with the strategic plan, and now that we have begun the rollout to all high schools next year and potentially more down the road, I think it's critical, at least in the public mind, to be able to connect that initiative with this goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McElveen. Ms. Palchik, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I'll speak, and then I have a couple of questions. I think Ms. Loveglass is here. So I'm very supportive of this. I think it's become very clear that while nothing is perfect, we have a growing equity issue in schools where our students and PTAs are able to purchase the technology, and others where they're not. So I think it's critical that we include this and that it's done in the way that includes the professional development to support the appropriate timing for our community. I did have a question I had asked Mr. McElveen, would like to ask Ms. Loveglass. I know that one of our community members raised some concerns around appropriate support for students at home when they use these devices, as well as access to, I believe he meant the Wi-Fi and any issues that may have arisen as we've gone through this pilot program. So if you could maybe address any issues you've seen or have not seen, and what steps we have or recommend we take to better support students who may not have that at home.
So included in the FCPS On initiative is mobile MiFis, mobile hotspots for any student, and that's K through 12, not just for high schools. If they do not have internet access at home, they can go to their library. That's today, the current school year. They can go and check out a mobile device so they can make sure they have internet access at home. In our pilot schools, we have not had a challenge with students needing support at home. We do have student support groups. We also have as Dr. Presidio could also explain, we also have programs for newcomers that help provide technology support training for those kids that had come perhaps from another country. They did not have technology experiences before, but we have not had after-hours concerns of our students, that we have great support, students helping students, and also having a lot of support within the schools if they're having challenges. But we have not had any kind of concerns raised by our students for after-hours support.
Thank you. My only question around the MiFi, I know I was able to help one community member access it and realize that it was a possibility. What is our communication and our plan to communicate the ability for students to, and I love to hear that any student who requests it to be able to have the mobile hotspot at home?
So we have provided information to all of our counselors. We provide information to all of our parent liaisons. So it's really on a family case-by-case basis if they have access, and certainly our teachers can refer students to, also our librarians as well, because it's actually the checkout process is through our libraries, our school libraries, and so all of those staff are well aware of the availability. We've had numbers of infograms as well to our staff to make sure that everyone is aware that these are available. And there's also been information, actually, I believe, in our family newsletters as well.
Okay.
Ms. Palchik, I know a lot of times this is something where word of mouth helps. So the STAC committee that represents a teacher from every school, I've just reiterated this access to them just this past month. And I do believe this board, by implementing FCPS on and taking it to scale, starting at the high school, is really going to help raise the awareness not only of the importance of access to technology, but the issue of access at home across K-12. And it's so wonderful that Ms. Lufglass and the entire IT organization are supporting this access K-12 for those MiFis. And we're going to continue to expand, repeating the message so that students that need that and don't have it can get it.
I appreciate that, and it's a very excited, excellent, start to that. I know it will take time, but anything we can do to help further their message, and if we can share it out through our newsletters, that would be very helpful. Thank you. I'm very happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Ms. Palchik. I have Ms. Strauss.
Thank you. I'm very pleased that we're adding intentionally FCPS on to our strategic plan. This is a critical and important initiative as we're rolling this out strategically and very carefully. So it is absolutely appropriate that this becomes part of the strategic plan. So thank you very much for this addition.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. I do have one quick question. Has FCPS on been trademarked?
I don't believe we have. We have trademarked other IT initiatives such as EDSL, which we have a patent for actually. But FCPS On was actually a name that was provided that was done through a student contest. So it was a student that recommended the name. So we could look into that. I don't know if that's something we need to do, but we have not copyrighted that name or trademarked the name.
Thank you very much. I was just curious. So with that, I will read the motion. I move to amend the main motion as follows. Amend the metrics, targets, and aspirations in the FCPS strategic plan by replacing the aspirational statement, all students will have access to an FCPS-provided individual computer or tablet consistent with one Fairfax's policy of digital access for all residents, to include the bolded phrase, through the FCPS on initiative. All students will have access to an FCPS-provided individual computer or tablet consistent with one Fairfax's policy of digital access for all residents. All those in favor? And that is unanimous with Mr. Wilson away from the table. I now call on Ms. McLaughlin for an amendment.
Thank you. I move to amend the main motion as follows. Add the following strategic plan access gap metric for high school students who take one or more AP or IB course by the end of high school. It will be the percent of students who earn a passing score on one or more AP or IB exam by the end of high school.
Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. McLaughlin, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. As I had shared with my colleagues at our work session, I was concerned that the metric we have in place right now has the percent of students who demonstrate proficiency, which is passing a course in at least one AP or IB course by the end of high school, and passing a course means a D or better. That metric right now in all of our subgroups, it's between 97 and 99% already reached that metric. As defined by the strategic plan, our metrics are supposed to assess progress toward our aspiration. And so we need to have a more aspirational metric, I believe, if the goal, as stated, is that we're trying to close access gaps. As many people know, achieving a passing score on an AP or an IB exam can translate to strengthening one's college admissions applications and also provide opportunities for students to earn valuable college credit that will help offset the high cost of college tuition. And so it is for these reasons that I do believe this will enhance and strengthen the strategic plan and allow our school division and the board to better monitor where we are trying to make progress and, again, close gaps and have stronger aspirations for all of our students. So I do hope that my colleagues will support this addition to the strategic plan.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, would you like to speak to the second?
No, I think she did a great job.
Excellent, thank you. So with that, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just had a question. So, and we don't have the strategic plan enhancements in front of us up here, so I just want to make sure I understand, and this may be a really silly question, but when we say percent of students who earn a passing score on one or more AP or IB exams, what percentages are we shooting for, or is this not, I mean, don't we, what are we? Yeah.
So thank you, Ms. Hines, for asking that question. I mean, certainly because this would be a new metric, then staff will have to obviously go and look at how they've created the other existing percentages and then what would be the aspirational targets. But I think the board has given enough direction to the superintendent and team on what we expect for growth in all subgroups. And since you asked a follow-up question, which is helpful, I do want to also add that staff said they would still disaggregate by the AP scores to the IB scores so we could see performance in those two areas, but that keeping it as one global metric is in keeping with the format of all the other metrics.
Okay, so just then, we would assume as a board that that the effect of this would be at some point the superintendent would return to the board the information about what those percentages would look like, and then do we have another chance to thumb up or thumb down the actual, I'm just curious.
Well, we would develop the metric and put it in the strategic plan, and then if there was a concern about the metric that was developed or how aggressive our targets were, the board could certainly adjust. As we said before, this strategic plan will be a living document for the board, and this would be one if you came back and went, oh, I think you went a little too low for where you wanted to get in terms of the markers for progress over the next 2 years or 4 years. You could give us that feedback. But we'll try to do it as we've done the others, establish the baseline for the last 3 years, and then set the goals based on those pass rates.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. So with that, I'll read the motion. I move to amend the main motion as follows. Add the following strategic plan, access gap metric, for high school students who take one or more AP or IB courses by the end of high school. Percent of students who earn a passing score on one or more AP or IB exams by the end of high school. All those in favor? And that motion is unanimous. So I now go back to the main motion. And before, okay, Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Strauss, and Ms. Derenak-Kofax. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you. As Mr. McElveen was presenting the revision to one of the metrics, and I agreed with my colleagues but didn't feel I needed to pile on with the clarity that by adding FCPS on initiative. So I support that very much. But Dr. Brabrand, I did want to make sure before I vote on this tonight that I want to make sure there isn't a misunderstanding on my part or anybody else's on the board. To my knowledge right now, the board has green-lighted that we were going to do the one-to-one initiative for our high schools, and I believe for the middle schools, but that the board wanted to have additional conversation about K-6 because other school divisions in the Commonwealth of Virginia haven't necessarily gone to the elementary school yet, and that we wanted to get more additional information. But when we read that metric, it says all students, which of course could technically mean K-12. So I reference this because before you joined our division, your predecessor had put in something similar, and when the Chantilly pilot, Chantilly pyramid pilot for the one-to-one devices was then presented to the board, it was stated that, well, you know, we understood that was where the board wanted to go. And so I just feel like there's a little bit more in that metric than necessarily where I believe the board has completely greenlit all the way down to K-6.
Right, I do want to clarify for you and for the board. In the fall, before we presented the budget, we had a work session, and we got clear direction for the board that this budget coming forward is only endorsing FCPS on at the high school level. We will continue to do our yearly review in consultation with John Hopkins to review what we have with FCPS on, and the board can make a future decision whether expansion. But there is in no way, with the metric being provided tonight, expanding FCPS on beyond high school. It is only for high school at this time.
Thank you so much. And then the second clarity that I wanted, because I did share this with my colleagues as well, that I know that this is a living document and we can refine these metrics along the way, but I did share that I had a little bit of heartburn on the metric that has for AP and IB courses that we're measuring students who pass the course, which is a D or better. And that right now we already have 97 to 99% of our students meeting that target. And so I was wondering, and again, not to put you on the spot, you don't have to answer it now, but what you might be able to speak to is, would you and the staff consider refining that for maybe the next year? Because I frankly don't think that's aspirational. I do think in a high-performing school district, we should hope, especially in those advanced courses, we would see mastery, not proficiency, and that typically in those courses you want to see students getting, you know, either a C or better or a B or better, and so that might be one piece. And then the second one that I had shared at the work session was about that we right now have pass rates for our SOLs, and I agreed with Ms. Hines that we're not a school system that wants to chase our SOLs and pass advance, but I do worry still that when we look at our pass advance scores, we do see real gaps. And so those are kind of the two areas that I would like to see us consider being more aspirational, given that we are such a high-performing school district, and I'd like for all students in all subgroups to show that progress.
What I can say to you is I'm really excited about tonight, because I think putting the metrics and targets out there are really going to clarify the strategic plan for our community and also for our staff and employees. I think you've made a great point that as we consider this a living document and as we've done these metrics, some of them frankly are really close to maturity. We may really already after a very short time be able to say this metric no longer needs to be a part of the plan. We might still collect the data, but does it need to be a key driver in how the board looks at policy or looks at the budget? So I'm very open to that, and I think you've got a great point. There are one or two metrics that really are pretty close to the aspiration. On the other, about the pass rates of pass and pass advance, I'm certainly open to further conversation. We collect that data, and we have it, and we can continue to look at whether that is something the board really wants to focus on additionally. I do think the work that we're about to do, reviewing our advanced academic programs and looking at access to high rigorous curriculum, will really help inform whether we want to take a deeper dive on that advanced pass rate for the SOLs, because I think a lot of kids who see rigor earlier in their elementary and middle school experiences often see greater success on the SOL in terms of getting an advance. So we're open to that.
Wonderful. Thank you for very helpful remarks.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Strauss?
Thank you. I think that we are coming to the end of a long and very important journey. And first I want to thank my colleagues. I think everyone has been very, very thoughtful, even up until the amendments tonight, which I think were all good amendments. And I thank Dr. Brabrand, Mr. Smith, and our entire instructional leaders who have worked so hard and very patiently with the school board, because everyone wanted to make sure that we got this right. And again, I think we appreciate the acknowledgement that this is a living document and that will need to be adjusted as we go forward. So I think congratulations to everyone, and I am deeply grateful for all of the work and look forward to seeing how this grows over time and as we help our students achieve at the very highest level possible and hold ourselves accountable for that progress. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Ms. Derenak-Kofax?
Following up on the comments of Ms. Strauss, I agree. It's the end of a long road. We all know that when we started this journey many years ago, the intent of the strategic plan was to have a transparent document that prioritized our focus, had aspirational goals, and then would tell the community what success would look like, both short-term and long-term goals. So I think this plan, staff, congratulations again, as Janie said, to Dr. Brabrand, Mr. Smith, and the entire team who worked on it, because the plan, it was a struggle for some time, but it is something that is improved with each round and will continue to serve as a living roadmap that will help our system grow and develop. And as we saw tonight, we had that growth right here with the additions, the good additions of the amendments from our colleagues. And so now we have these 8 target areas with intentional metrics and focus. And so I look forward to this plan's continual improvement, the improvements it will bring to our system, and it will hold us accountable in a transparent way. So I'm glad we're here and we all worked hard on it. So yay, let's vote on it.
Thank you, Ms. Derenak-Kofax. Ms. Keyes-Gamarra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am grateful for this process. I think this is probably the first time I went through the whole cycle. And so I want to make a few comments. One, I'm glad that we are where we are, but I want the public to know that we're not satisfied with where we are. I've expressed, and some of my other colleagues as well, some of the metrics, particularly with respect to our African American and Hispanic students, the gaps are rather glaring. And unfortunately, those gaps have been there for some time. And so I want to clearly state to the public and to our students and to our staff that those gaps do not represent the expectations that we have. All of our data indicates, particularly when we start looking at passage rates and even advanced passage rates of all of our students, we see the capabilities of our kids. And I agree with Dr. Brabrand that we do need to have a greater focus on our elementary level and making sure that all of our students have those advanced learning opportunities, focusing on abilities, whether we're talking about special ed students or whether we're talking about some of the areas where we have higher levels of poverty. Where we give children opportunities, we see children excel. And so when I look at these numbers, I am both pleased that we've come up with the metrics and that we're going to be more transparent, but a part of me is just saying, okay, we have just begun to really dig in. And so I want to make sure that that message is conveyed, that a passage of this does not in any way suggest satisfaction with where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keyes-Gamarra. Ms. Hines.
Yeah, thank you. So just on the question of SOL tests, I think the danger is that SOL tests, as most standardized tests, are riddled with socioeconomic bias. So the question is, pass advanced just means kids get that many more questions right, which means they're able to overcome the socioeconomic bias. To some degree, that's what it means. And so the question for me is how much work should we do
to serve those sort of tests. But I hear what Ms. McLaughlin is saying, that passing SOL test is a floor, and it's not a very high achievement. So that leads me always to think about, are we developing better assessments and better measures that are tied to the portrait of a graduate, and maybe, I don't know, portfolio things that we dipstick rather than this, did you want to say something, Dr. Braber?
I just want to say, and those metrics are being built into our strategic plan around presentations of learning, a rubric for that, and for the capstone, so that we really can start to codify deeper the portrait of a graduate attributes we want to see in a classroom. We've been doing pilots, we've got good stuff going in some schools, but it's time to scale it across all of our schools. And I think it's going to help. And frankly, that work may actually make kids' performance on test do better, instead of focusing just on the test and hoping that focusing on that is going to lift kids. So we believe this strategic plan really has balanced metrics to really show the whole continuum, and we do know that it's time to really accelerate doing this portrait of a graduate work in the classroom more deeply than we have before.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the higher level that we're looking for. And what you measure is what you teach, right? And it drives what we teach in the classroom. And we want to be driving that project-based learning and all that other good stuff anyway. So it's a really important conversation, though, and I appreciate Ms. McLaughlin bringing it up. The only other thing I was going to speak to is the new metric that's been added since the last time we looked at this. We've added a few, but the one that I was particularly looking for is that the AAP, the Advanced Academic Curriculum, be available in every classroom every day for every child. I think, to my mind, that is the fundamental measure of how equitably we are providing access to challenging curriculum, much more than how many kids we can kind of squeeze into those centers or those self-contained classrooms. Because the reality is, every kid in every classroom every day has the ability to rise to that challenge in some time during the day. And I'm a classroom teacher, and so I know that's not easy, but it has to be the expectation. And so I'm encouraged that it's in there. I understand that we're still working on sort of how we measure that, and I think if we're looking at how well the curriculum is embedded in the grade level team conversations and practice, and how well we have advanced academic resource teachers embedded in those meetings and in those schools to help support those teachers, those are the measures that will make it possible for teachers to be doing that. So thank you very much for putting that in there. I can gladly support this.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. I have Mr. Tigner, followed by Mr. Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to second the comment about advanced academic programs and like equitable access to them for students. I might have mentioned it to you guys earlier, but just from my personal experience, being placed in that class and then being split apart for a bunch of my friends and watching them view themselves as not sufficient learners and not as smart as other kids, it didn't seem exactly fair to create that judgment at a second grade level and decide, perhaps to some extent, how a kid views himself for the coming 9 years of his schooling. Just being behind that 1 year, right? I mentored kids in elementary school, and they were in non-advanced placement math class, and they were choosing their math class for 7th grade. And I'm like, all right, well, you should try for honors class. It's 7th grade. Give it a go. 7th grade math honors. And he's like, oh, I don't know, I'm not really that good at math. He got an A in math, right? But he wasn't at advanced placement, and he didn't think he was good at math. And he didn't push himself. And I tried to convince him, but he did not go into that class, and I can't help but assume that, sadly, that trend might have continued later on. And before you know it, he's 2-3 years behind in math than other students in 12th grade. And who knows how that will affect his future life. It's sort of like the domino effect, right? Who knows how large the next domino will be. So providing that equitable access, especially at that early education, if that kid struggles in 3rd grade, that grade's not going to impact them in their future. It really won't, but it might make that one kid who might have not otherwise had it stand out.
Thank you, Mr. Tigner. Mr. Moon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a couple of points. First of all, I want to thank Superintendent and Chief Operating Officer Marty Smith and other staff members from our Department of Facilities and Transportation for modifying or updating, rather, or accelerating our targets for reducing or eliminating trailers in the school system from regionally 20-year plan to a 10-year plan. Even though 3-year baseline shows 839 trailers we are using for instructional purposes, my understanding is that we now only have about 750 trailers being used for instructional purposes. But looking at our target for school years 18 to 20, school year 20 means only a year from now, a little more than a year from now, that a number of trailers will go down to 480. That is about 35% reduction. And if he could do 35% reduction, perhaps if he could continue doing that, we may not even need 10 years to accomplish our goals. And maybe in 3 years, they will be done with all the trailers. Maybe that may be hopeful thinking. Okay, that's the first one. Second one is, as Mrs. Karen Kiskomara stated, that this is only the first step we are taking to address the student success goals, especially when you are looking at the student achievement gaps. And I would love to have an opportunity to have really more in-depth discussion about how factors such as poverty and language barriers, affect student achievement and student outcome, and what more we can do as a school system to help students in poverty and language barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. And before we take the vote, I do want to spend a couple of moments talking. Oh, Ms. Palchik, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Just came up.
Very brief comments as well, and agree with so much of what has been shared. And also want to thank my colleagues, Dr. Braybrand and your staff. I know it's been a probably longer than expected process to get here. I think it's been very thoughtful, and we have been able to incorporate so much of what's important to us in the county. In addition to what's been shared to me, I think what's really important is that, as was said, we do value what we measure. And I think we are finally measuring the areas that show some significant gaps in equity within our schools, within our classrooms, within our county. And some of it's not looking good, but we know the work ahead of us. And so I think we've taken the bold action of being truly transparent and showing where we need to make improvements, whether it be students with disabilities, our English language learners, students in poverty, etc. I also want to add one thing. I think it's critical to share that so much of these goals, they do lie on our school system as the main responsibility. But we can't do it alone. As was mentioned, areas such as early childhood education, even before 3rd grade, early pre-K access, and support for students. Even today, we're talking about access to internships, workforce development. It really is going to take our whole community. So I just want to be clear that there's so much the schools can do and should do. And I hope that we continue to have support in our community with our county counterparts, the state, federal government, but also our nonprofit and private sector, because it will take truly one Fairfax to make this happen. This is a very heavy lift we have ahead of us. And I hope we have the community buy-in and our partners' buy-ins to ensure that we make it. So very happy to support what is, I think, a critical first or second step in this right direction.
Thank you, Ms. Palchik. So before we take the vote, I will just spend a short moment to thank Mr. Smith and Liddy. You guys are amazing. You've stuck with us through this whole process, so thank you very much. It has been at times, a very torturous process, it must have felt like, but it was one well worth doing, because I want to remind all of my colleagues on the board that this is the beginning. This is not the end. This actually allows us to get down to work and really focus our activities on what matters most to the students of this system, and more importantly, how we are going to fulfill the FCPS promise for opportunity and the opportunity promise for every child in the system, and not just continue to have the challenges we've had in the past of, you focus on what comes to you on a given day. So this will allow us to be very intentful. It will also allow us to be intentful in how we approach future budgets, because we measure what we value and we invest in what we value. And so I am very pleased to be able to support this. I thank you all for all of your hard work and your leadership in getting us to where we are today. And with that, I will call for the vote. The motion before the board is, I move the board accept the proposed targets and metrics to the strategic plan and as amended. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. The motion passes. New business. The following are new business agenda items. There will not be a vote tonight on these items, but action is scheduled at a future meeting. 6.01, approve revenue and expenditure changes reflected in the fiscal year 2019 third quarter budget review as detailed in the agenda item. 6.02, approve the titles listed for high school language arts as recommended by the Language Arts Basal Instruction Materials Adoption Committee and the Selection Advisory Committee. 6.03, award a contract for the Lee High School synthetic turf field replacement project to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent of facilities and transportation services to execute, deliver, and administer the contract on behalf of the board. Of the school board. 6.04, award a contract for the Hughes Middle School renovation project to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent of facilities and transportation services to execute, deliver, and administer the contract on behalf of the school board. 6.05, adopt the 2020-21 standard school year calendar. 6.06, award the contract for the boiler replacement at Weyanoke Elementary School to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and authorize the division superintendent or the assistant superintendent of facilities and transportation services to execute and administer the contract on behalf of the school board. I now call on Dr. Brabrand for superintendent matters.
Thank you, Chairman Corbett Sanders. Just a couple of things. I want to mention to you, Chantilly High School and McLean are among 12 schools nationwide and the only 2 high schools in Virginia to be selected as recipients of the 2019 First Amendment Press Freedom Award. This is the 5th consecutive award for Chantilly High and the 3rd award overall for McLean. It was bestowed by the Journalism Education Association, the National Scholastic Press Association, and the Quill and Scroll International Honorary Society. The First Amendment Press Freedom Award recognizes public high schools that actively support, teach, and protect First Amendment rights and responsibilities of students and teachers, with an emphasis on student-run media where students make all final decisions of content. There's a reception this March, beginning at 3:30 p.m. at the Sherwood Community Center, honoring students from 22 Fairfax County Public Schools that were named recipients of the 2019 Student Peace Awards of Fairfax County. And the Peace Awards began in 2006 with the hope of encouraging people to think more about peace as a means to an end, as a means and an end, not a means to an end, but a means and an end, and to recognize young people who work as peacemakers in our community. The achievements of our students who are being recognized are remarkable. That's this Sunday at 3:30 in the Sherwood Community Center, which is in the city of Fairfax. Just a couple of examples of those students I just want to call to your attention. At Mount Vernon High School, Burhan Ahmed is a leader of the Stony Brook Junior Volunteers, supporting children from low-income families in that neighborhood in Stony Brook. For 3 years, he's run the athletics program and participated in cleanups, food drives, and toy collections while showing children the joy of volunteering. And at Westfield High, McKee Neves organized the Indigenous Student Union Club for students interested in sharing their heritage or learning more about Native American history and culture. To honor Native American Heritage Month, He presented profiles of Native Americans on the school's daily news and led club members in creating a display for Westfield's Culture Night. Benny mentioned the National PTA Conference next week. I'm thrilled. I didn't know you were the student who was coming. That is terrific. I know there is also going to be a student from Parkland who will be there as one of the keynote speakers for the National PTA. And they have asked me to come later in the afternoon and speak on a panel about safety and security and what Fairfax County has done and this board approved to enhance safety and security in our school system, with a particular interest on our focus for social-emotional supports, where we added in additional supports with your leadership in our middle schools for school psychologists and social workers. And then finally, I just want to say, wow, it's a big deal tonight. Every one of you supported this strategic plan. You are sending a message to this leadership team, to all of our employees and our principals about what matters. And I believe the clarity and the accountability contained in the strategic plan is going to help us move the needle with our staff and employees to do what's hard work, but the clarity about where to go is so important. And I also think for our community, the transparency builds trust. And the transparency in this strategic plan, I hope, accelerates trust in our community, particularly as we can begin to show progress. I hope on many measures, frankly, all of the measures. But where we fall short, then we have to have those tough conversations about what do we need to do differently. Not the same, but differently to achieve success. So I really, really appreciate it. I want to thank Marty, the leadership team, Leedy, I think just stepped out, Julie Fowler. I can't tell you how many leadership team meetings we started with, we're going to go over the strategic plan again. But honestly, it's been worth the effort, and I promise you, this, you're going to look back in a year, and then in a year after that, and see that this was a moment that really will, I think, make Fairfax County Public Schools even better than it's been before. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. Next on the agenda is board reports, and I call on Ms. Palchik for an update of the Public Engagement Committee. Ms. Evans for a Governance Committee report, and Mr. Moon for an update on the forum held earlier this evening. So Ms. Palchik, please.
Yes, thank you. At the last Public Engagement Committee meeting, we've finished reviewing our recommendations for updates to the citizen participation section of the governance manual. And I will be working with the chair to schedule a work session to bring those recommendations back to the full board. In addition, we did have to reschedule some of our meetings due to changes in the work agenda. So the two upcoming PEC meetings are scheduled for March 25th at 4:30 p.m. and May 14th at 5 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Palchik. Ms. Evans for Governance Committee report, please.
Yes, thank you. The Governance Committee is making great progress on revisions to the overall strategic governance manual, and we hope to have a report to the full board soon.
And Mr. Moon on the forum.
Yes, board had a forum discussion earlier in the evening. Forum is where individual school board members can bring a topics of their choice for rather a somewhat informal way of this, having a discussion. And tonight's forum topic request actually came from this board member, and there was a board consensus to direct the superintendent and division counselor to file an amicus brief in the case of Grimm versus Gloucester School Board, supporting Grimm.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Next on the agenda is board matters, and I call on Ms. Hines.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I also want to thank Dr. Brabrand and staff and Marty Smith for all your work on the measures and on the strategic plan. I think we do know that measuring and being transparent, those are the things that move the needle, and it took a while for all of us to get there, and I appreciate the time and effort. I just have had a couple of things happening in Hunter Mill and a few more things coming up. I want to thank Supervisor Kathy Hudgens for her 20th I believe, her 20th budget town hall. I don't know if she's been doing it for 20 years, but she's been doing her job for 20 years. And she's been holding a budget town hall in Hunter Mill for several years. And so we had the latest one on Saturday morning. I want to thank Lee Burden for helping to explain the FCPS budget, and Dr. Braybrand was there as well. It was a good turnout, and always good questions from the community about our budget and the county's budget. Coming up next week, we have the quarterly meeting of the Reston Opportunity Neighborhood. And I want to take this opportunity, I'll be going, and I just want to take the opportunity once again to thank the folks in Reston for all their work. Cornerstones is an amazing organization up there that does tremendous volunteer work in every corner of Reston, and that's no pun intended, Cornerstones. But really, anywhere you see people doing important work in Reston, it's probably Cornerstones. And they have been the foundation of the Reston Opportunity Neighborhood work. I also want to thank all the FCPS staff who show up. I know Marianne Panarelli has come, and Douglas Tyson, Amy Monticchio, the principal at Langston Hughes Middle School, often comes to the meetings. So we have good representation there. I think the thing I would say about the Opportunity Neighborhood program is what's most powerful about it, I think, is how it empowers the residents and the people who live in the community, the parents and the families. It builds their capacity for advocacy to make sure that they're getting what they need, and that we are centering their voices in the community. And so it's a wonderful experience to go and listen and find out what they're doing every quarter. Also, the next evening on March 14th, the local chapter of the NAACP will be holding a Housing for All forum at the First Baptist Church in Vienna. I intend to be there. I think that the school system has a great interest in housing here, affordable housing here in Fairfax County, partly because housing security is so important for our students, and we do have housing mobility in some of our schools. That creates a problem. We also have housing patterns in the county, we know this, that create sort of a tale of two counties. We have school-sized pockets of wealth and school-sized pockets of poverty, and those require significant resources to support those schools that have high levels of poverty in them, and that's all about housing patterns. And then also we have a workforce of 25,000 employees that would like to be able to live where they work. And if they can't, then that affects our turnover. So I look forward to that, and I thank the NAACP and First Baptist Church for setting that up. And finally, speaking of First Baptist Church, I had the great pleasure to hear my colleague, Karen Keys-Gamarra, as the featured speaker last week at the First Baptist Church. I think it was your speech at the First Baptist Church, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. I can't remember. Is it Action Sunday? But it was a Wednesday night. What was it's a program.
It was the Heritage Series for Black History Month.
Thank you, Heritage Series. I missed the title of that, but I really enjoyed your remarks, and I know that everyone else in the church did. It was wonderful to have your perspective as a school board member and a longtime member of this community. And so I learned a lot. I know everyone else did. The First Baptist Church in Vienna is doing great work these days. They're really an important and powerful resource in the community. So.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on the forum topic that was mentioned by one of our citizen participants, this was a very important discussion that we had on the strategic plan, but unfortunately the board also had an important discussion in the forum setting and actually took action in the forum setting as a board to commit the board to spending funds to have outside counsel prepare a legal brief in a constitutional law case that arises out of another county in Virginia, but frankly has very little to do with our own county itself. So I think in the conversation regarding transparency, scheduling a topic of significance to many in the community at a forum and then taking action at the forum, which is quite unusual since the forum typically results in a referral to one of our committees or to a work session of this board to discuss a topic in greater depth. I urge the community members that have an interest in this topic to seek out the audio tape. It is a meeting that is recorded, however, not broadcast.
and frankly has often very few citizens at the meeting because they're held somewhat irregularly before our board meetings. But if you are interested, I urge you to listen to the recording of that meeting, as the board made that, in my opinion, a significant decision to have outside counsel prepare a brief for us that then we will discuss in a future closed session about the amicus brief that's being prepared. So I think when we talk about transparency, we ought to be sure to include those other topics of community interest that might, in fact, engage a large portion of our citizens on the topic, and not have it be discussed at a forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. McElveen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, like many of us, we are living a season of lasts. You know, the last time we will attend various events in our community in our current capacity, and this past week has not been for want in terms of important events in our community. Many of my colleagues joined me at the Real Food for Kids Culinary Challenge, along with Dr. Braybrand, which is an incredible event that, you know, throughout my years on the board has certainly become an entrenched part of our community, and it's been so great to see that's now become a staple for the entire region, and it's actually hosted in our schools. Another event that board members might not know about is the Hyperbowl instead of hyperbole poetry slam, which is held at George Mason every year, and I've had the honor of serving as a judge for that. And many of our teachers and students participate in that, and that's also an East Coast wide competition, and you know, many of our students go on to win, and it's a very great thing. Just last night we had the Scholastic Arts Ceremony. Ms. Corbett Sanders and I were there, and it's great to see our student art. And also, last night, Mr. Moon and I concluded our last season together at the basketball state championship. It's been so fun to join him, and this year with Dr. Ivy and the Lake Braddock administrative team down there to support our students. It's really one of the highlights of my year and career on the school board. But tonight you will see that we are wearing purple, or at least I'm wearing purple, not only for Lake Braddock, oh yeah, and Mr. Moon is wearing purple as well, not only in honor of Lake Braddock, but also in honor of many special events occurring this month. First and foremost, tomorrow is International Women's Day. And of course the color purple is the color of the suffragettes. It's the color of the ERA movement, which has faltered in Virginia, but is still moving on in other states, and which we hope to see pass this year. Many of you will know that our colleague Ted Velkoff was passionate about getting that included as part of our legislative program several years ago, and we have kept that in, and we continue to advocate for it from this dais. And also it's Women's History Month, and this is our final time together as this group, where we have a board of 9 powerful leaders who happen to be women, and who it makes up 3/4 of this board, and it's been such an honor to work beside them and serve with them. And as one board member, I appreciate their service to the community, and I am proud to have honored you with roses this year and every year, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McElveen. Ms. Derenak-Kovacs.
Thank you, Mr. McElveen, for these beautiful roses, and we really do appreciate them. We really appreciate your thoughtfulness in acknowledging that. And I also want to say it's Mr. McElveen's birthday, so we did sing to him earlier in the back. He's 25 again. So also, I want to thank the Fairfax Association of Elementary School Principals for your meet and greet that you held last year. I know many of us were able to attend, and I appreciate this opportunity to meet face-to-face and talk to so many of you about the issues in your schools. I also had a great time with Twain Middle School students and the Twain TV crew, and they asked me to talk about budget, and these middle schoolers had some good questions to ask me, even as the budget chair. So thank you for being so knowledgeable and so astute. And thank you to the club sponsor, Mr. Adam Schechter, for your support of this program for many, many years. Mr. Schechter has been supporting this program since my kids, who are now grown and flown, were there. So thank you so much for doing that. And tomorrow I am looking forward to visiting Edison High School to see 11th grade students who are part of our Global STEM Challenge program present projects they've been working on since the beginning of the year. And it's always amazing to see what our students can do, and I look forward to that visit as I have been doing for several years now.
Thank you, Ms. Derenak-Kofax. Mr. Moon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank my colleagues who supported my forum topic request earlier in the evening. That there was almost a unanimous support for that. I appreciate that. Secondly, as far as a Real Food for Kids culinary challenge is concerned, that is something that I want to thank Mr. McAlvin for initiating about 6-7 years ago. He has always advocated very hard to provide healthy food for our students, and I'm going to miss you. But we're going to continue on. Those who are going to be returning, staying on the school board, will continue working on what you're advocating for. As far as basketball game is concerned, the state championship, I hope that last night was not the last time you and I would go down to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond together to watch a basketball game. Whether you remain in public service or not, whether you and I remain in public service or not, those things you and I can still do together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, first I want to express my appreciation as one of the magisterial board members who represents Lake Braddock, that while I could not be there, I'm so glad that our Deputy Superintendent, Francis Ivey, was able to join Ryan and Mr. Moon there. It's incredibly remarkable when you consider how competitive the Commonwealth of Virginia is for basketball, and for the Lake Braddock boys team to go to the States and perform so well and fight so hard. Coming within 4 points, I understand, at one point. It's wonderful. And little factoid, my husband grew up with the coach of the Lake Braddock men's basketball team, Brian Metris. His brother was in our wedding, and the brother and my husband played at Woodson together all those years ago. So it just is a 1 degree of separation in Fairfax County. And don't let anybody tell you 1 million people, because it's just like a little small town. So very excited for Brian. I think that's the farthest he's been able to go, and he is a very revered coach at Lake Braddock. And so what an exciting thing, and so glad you guys were there to cheer on the Bruins. I did also want to make sure that our citizens are aware that, I'm going to put this in my newsletter. Sorry, fighting a cold. The county has their strategic plan. So here we just voted tonight on our metrics and everything, but Fairfax County government is now undertaking this as well. And they've been having focus meetings, and but more importantly, they have a survey. And I and many of you may have noticed you got a postcard in the mail. So I just want to really encourage citizens that it's so important when we look at the dynamic county that we live in, but it's changing and growing all the time. So make sure your voices are heard. And I encourage my colleagues as well, if you can send a keep in touch with the link, we can help drive the awareness in our community for our families for that. The other thing I wanted to just share with everybody is that Dr. Braybrand and I will be attending in a performance that's being sponsored by the Connor Strong Foundation, which is a foundation in honor of a young man who lost his life to suicide. And he, along with our SEPTA, is co-sponsoring the play, and it's called Abira and the Mountain. And it will be Saturday, March 23rd at 2 p.m. It's a free performance over at Robinson High School and their Russell Theater. Dr. Brabrand will be offering some remarks. But the play is about Abira, who is a princess in a wheelchair, and she is strong, curious, and innovative. And she longs to go out into the kingdom to see what is beyond the castle. The lead actress in it actually is also a co-author of the play and is a young woman who happens to be quadriplegic with cerebral palsy. So it's really just a remarkable opportunity to celebrate ability, as we talk so often about all of our students. And so if my colleagues want to know more about that, please let me know. But very appreciative that our Fairfax County SEPTA group is helping to sponsor that as well. And also just wanted to make sure my community knows that in 3 weeks, on Thursday, March 28th, I will be having evening office hours. I usually do them more like a town hall roundtable, certainly talking about the budget, but then other issues of interest. And then finally, I wanted to say to our amazing student representative to the school board, Benny, I am so thankful that you were willing to share your prepared remarks from a few weeks ago about the homework load on our students. I have been talking about it for 7 years. Mr. Moon knows even before I joined the school board I was concerned about it, and he was the one who first showed me that there was a homework policy. And in fact, when my boys used to quote it to their teachers, the teachers would say, I don't know what you're talking about. You better show me because I'm not sure I believe you. So it is something that we all collectively need to be more intentional in our work going forward. And I hope you know that as far as I'm concerned, one of your important legacies is bringing a real voice to that issue. And we owe it to you and your investment to make sure we do more with that topic. And I also remember Ms. Hines, we've had those conversations in the past too. It's the quality versus the quantity. And I'll leave it with this. Our teachers are just as impacted by homework loads. Everything that they assign for graded assessments is not just the work that the students have to do, but then the teachers have to grade it, and then they have to input it into the SIS, and then they have to have students who are absent, and then they have to give. So it's something that Dr. Brabrand impacts our employees and our students. And so I look forward to future conversations on that. Thank you again, Benny.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
Well, that's a hard act to follow, but I'll start by thanking Ryan for the rose. How about that as a bridge? I just want to mention a couple of things. I actually was a little bit late to our meeting today because I was at the Future Business Leaders of America competition at Robinson High School as one of their judges, and I'm always amazed to see our students and how well prepared they are and how well spoken they are, and so it was my pleasure to be there. I'm also the liaison for the Title I schools, and I have not had an opportunity to tell this board how fantastic that committee has become. They have done amazing work this year. They have had phenomenal attendance from across the county, and the parents are extremely engaged about how to improve their schools, how to serve the families within their schools, and to sort of cross-pollinate their very positive experiences. So it's just a really positive group, and I'm just very proud of them. I feel like I had very little to do with it. They have an amazing chair in Mr. Mike Woltz, but very good work, and so I hopefully we'll have a report from them soon. And I also had the pleasure of attending an presenting with Karen Corbett Sanders an anti-bullying talk to a group just a few weeks ago at the Islamic Center. So I will stop with that. I know that we have some discipline cases to take care of, but it's happy Thursday.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you. I too will start by thanking Mr. McElveen for the rose. I very much appreciate it. I'd love to say I'm wearing purple, but it's actually serendipitous that I'm wearing purple, but I'll claim it's for International Women's Day tomorrow. And happy birthday, Mr. McElveen, as well. I appreciate that Sleep Awareness Week was put on our announcements. We've got the sun coming back pretty soon here, and we've got daylight savings coming, one of my favorite days of the year. I did want to put out in a note of caution. One of the major days for having car accidents is the day after the time change, because people do get less sleep. So I hope all of our teens and all of our parents and all of our employees as well will be very careful, especially when they're driving after the time change. I've appreciated attending some wonderful events in the last couple of weeks. One was at Justice High School, their first annual Black History Month Assembly. This was created by the students, the Black Student Union there, and it was fantastic. It had great student performances and an inspirational speaker, and this is the first of hopefully many for years to come. I also that same day attended the Justice High School Pyramid Art Show, and it was just an amazing talent on display from all of the from elementary school through middle school through high school. So and it was a full house, which was great to see all the support for the arts there. And I had mentioned before taking a look at the Second Chance program, which is our for the breakfast between periods. So students who don't have the opportunity to eat breakfast before school, which is still a little early for a teenage body, they're able to get it between periods, and it was with tremendous precision. I have to say they got the students in and out of those cafeteria lines in very short order, and got them an opportunity for some nutrition and energizing in the morning. I appreciate the invitation to go to Sleepy Hollow Elementary School's PTA. We had a wonderful conversation, great questions from the parents there, so I look forward to following up with those parents, and I look forward also to attending the PTA at Woodburn Elementary School with my colleague Dahlia Palchek next Thursday. Look forward to seeing parents and teachers there, as well as I plan to attend the Annandale High School Just World Festival tomorrow afternoon and evening, which is always a tremendous event there. So happy International Women's Day to my colleagues and Women's Day supporters.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Ms. Strauss?
Thank you, and happy birthday, Mr. McElveen. And congratulations on your daughter's preschool adventures going forward at a school I know well. Highly recommended. I also had the opportunity to attend the Scholastic Arts Award, and they were wonderful. And thank you for your wonderful remarks, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, as one of the guest speakers. The McLean Citizens Association had 2 meetings in the last couple of weeks. One was for the discussion of the county budget and the school budget. And thank you, Dr. Braybrand and Ms. Leedy, for being there. There was more interest in the county budget than the school budget, but there was support for the increase in teacher pay. So no one complained about school spending. There was a lot of questioning about the continued overcrowding at McLean High School. In the following week, the McLean Citizens Association Education Committee also had a community meeting, and we had student speakers. Elementary, middle, and high school, and they were quite well prepared. The younger students talked about recess and games they like to play or wish they could play at recess. Our middle and high school students spoke more about social emotional learning, stress, bullying. There was description of some very disappointing anti-Semitism that seems to be occurring in the community, and concerns about bullying of students on LGBT issues. So again, Dr. Braybrand was there, and Dr. Zuluaga was there, and I think you all handled particularly the student questions extremely well. And again, we had a lot of discussion about the growing overcrowding at McLean High School. And I will be at the Langley PTSA meeting again to discuss the CIP on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strauss. Before we adjourn, I just want to briefly talk a little bit about some of the upcoming events. Very pleased to be going to the Peace Awards this Sunday, and I will be joining Dr. Brabrand at it. And I also wanted to thank the Community Foundation for the excellent work they did in the Shape of the Region conference, which actually highlighted much of the work that is being done here in Fairfax County on the One Fairfax initiative. However, it laid out areas where there's more work to be done in creating opportunities for people everywhere versus just focused in certain zip codes. The focus of the Shape of the Region was that your zip code should not determine the opportunities available to you in the United States, and highlighted that there is a real mobility, economic mobility challenge facing the United States that we have not ever faced before, where opportunities to do as well or better than your parents have decreased significantly throughout the country, and that policymakers need to be very intentful working with the business and nonprofit community to address the opportunity gaps. And so I was very impressed with the conference. They launched a One Region initiative on equity, which looks very similar to the One Fairfax initiative. So I am looking forward to working with them going forward on that. And it's actually, it is a great example of how Fairfax County actually starts initiatives, takes the lead on them, and they are picked up elsewhere, and highlights the responsibility we have here in Fairfax County to be leaders in addressing issues of equity and inclusion, no matter where we are. So I was very excited about that. Now, with that, we are going to adjourn this meeting. Actually, not adjourn this meeting. We're going to go into closed session again. And so I have a motion. The board will now make a motion to go into closed meeting to, 1, protect the privacy of individuals in personal matters not related to public business pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3711A4 of the Code of Virginia, and to discuss and consider disciplinary matters concerning one or more students pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A2 of the Code of Virginia. Do I have a motion? That motion is made by Mr. McElveen, seconded by Ms. Strauss. All those in favor? And that motion is unanimous. We are now in closed.